My name is Michael Gallo, and I'm a private investigator. You are most likely thinking one or two things about me upon learning of my profession. Some of you probably picture a charming but jaded gumshoe, with a fascination for finding the truth, a la J.J. Gitz from the film Chinatown. Others probably picture a grimy drunkard that preys on the victims of tragedy, promising them closure that may not even exist, to find my lifelong bender. The truth is much less glamorous. I'm a failed police detective. After making one too many blunders, I opted to resign before my supervisor had the chance to fire, transfer, or demote me. The skill set I developed as a detective translated well into PI work, so I joined a local firm in my hometown. The job really is a lot duller than most people realize. A lot of the times I worked with my county's DA's office on their less important cases, gathering up information on low-level criminals. Other times I was a glorified background checker for local business owners. It was mundane as hell, really, but it always paid well enough to keep me in my decent apartment, so I never felt the need to quit. Not until recently, at least. 2 weeks ago, I decided it was time to retire a lot earlier than I had originally planned. It's been hard to find the words to explain my retirement, and I've found myself questioning my own sanity because of what I've uncovered in my final case. I figured writing my story as I remembered it might be therapeutic. So now I'm here. A month ago, a woman of about 40 years named Marjorie Holden came into my office asking me to investigate a possible disappearance. Miss Holden told me that her nephew Aaron had been out of touch for over 5 years, and that she was worried that he was in trouble. I told her to go to the police, but she figured they wouldn't take her claim seriously, since she hadn't reported the possible disappearance until now. Turns out Miss Holden was a member of a locally famous family. The Snells were well known in Northeast Pennsylvania for their wealth as well as their dysfunction. They owned one of the most lucrative local businesses in the form of the Snell Foundry, a manufacturer of airplane parts that had originally become an industry powerhouse during World War II. Jackson Snell, Marjorie's grandfather, was the man who secured the contract with the US government. He died under mysterious circumstances immediately after the war ended. The death of Jackson Snell seems to have put a lasting strain on the family, and their dysfunction has persisted into the modern era. Back to the case, Marjorie told me that Aaron had left over 10 years ago to go to college in Maryland, and he simply never returned. She believed that Aaron might have used his father's willingness to pay for his studies as an excuse to escape his family for good, and that Aaron's now deceased father simply didn't care enough to look into what his son has been doing before he died unexpectedly. Marjorie stated that she had some contact with Aaron after the death of his father, but that she hadn't heard back from him in about 5 years. She seemed to notice my reluctance to accept her case, so she offered to pay me double what I usually received if I made her case my top priority. I agreed reluctantly. I found quickly that there wasn't much about Aaron to be found on the surface. 3 friends of Aaron's from high school that Marjorie had been able to identify told me he had gone off the grid once he left town. Marjorie provided me with his Facebook page, but that clearly hadn't been used in about 8 years. I called the university he attended only to find out he had been kicked out for academic violations and personal conduct issues 3 months into his second semester. To the untrained eye, the search for Aaron was FUBAR. However, I was able to discover that the email he used to set up his Facebook account was also linked to a YouTube account. It seemed that Aaron had developed a fascination with urban exploration, and that he made a hobby out of videotaping his experiences, investigating abandoned buildings, and posting those videos online. His last YouTube video had been posted in February of 2011. I watched the last few videos Aaron posted on his channel, and found something important in his next to last video. To celebrate hitting 2,000 subscribers, I'm going to explore a place with some personal history. My dad owned a warehouse when I was a kid, but he died a few years ago and his business died with him. Thanks to him, there's an abandoned warehouse with my name on it, literally and figuratively. I called Marjorie and asked her if she had been to the Snell Foundry recently, to which she replied no. The building itself had been condemned after her brother's death, and had left the building to rot where it stood in a wooded area a few miles outside of Scranton. She gave me a key to the warehouse to go investigate for any signs of Aaron. Upon entry, I found a video camera lying on the floor of the warehouse, which I took with me. I also noticed a message sprawled in spray paint on the window of the foreman's office. "They are watching. Creepy." I called out for Aaron after walking through the warehouse for a second time, then decided to leave to examine the contents of the video camera. There were a few video recordings still on the SD card, most of which were uneventful. However, they were all videos of Aaron. He had in fact been there at some point. The final 7 recordings on the SD card were that of his return trip to his hometown. In the first recording, he said that since he didn't have a car, he would have to take a bus to Scranton and then hitchhike to the Snell Foundry building. The next recording saw him outside the Snell Foundry building just before nightfall. He remarked that he was worried because it was cold and getting colder, and he had no desire to walk through the woods to get back to civilization this late into the night. He debated leaving and returning the next morning, but instead he pulled out a flashlight and a crowbar from his backpack and made his way into the warehouse through one of the bay doors to make his way inside. The next 3 recordings were entirely uneventful. He told some anecdotes from his childhood and was very obviously disappointed to find little of interest inside the building. He started his 5th recording by examining the cryptic message that was sprawled on the window of the foreman's office. He was silent while examining the message, almost like he was unfazed by it. His breathing picked up a little and he made a comment that it wasn't the creepiest thing he's ever seen in an abandoned building. I expected him to elaborate further, but instead the video just abruptly ended. It was a little perplexing, but I figured there wasn't much to it. Maybe the camera's battery died, or maybe he bumped the button. That's why the beginning of the 6th recording shocked me a little. It was a video of Aaron breathing heavily inside what seemed like a shoddy bathroom. He put his flashlight down on the sink facing towards him, and then turned the camera towards himself. He was unsurprisingly visibly distraught, and he spoke in a frightened whisper. I saw something like a mannequin. It wasn't there when I got to the office. I know it for a fact. It was literally 10 feet away from me, and looking right at me. I had questions. Why would there ever be a mannequin in a warehouse that manufactured planes? Plus, it sounded like it should have been right in plain sight when Aaron approached the office. Why hadn't he noticed it on the video? Why hadn't I seen it when I'd been there? Did the same person that put it there for Aaron remove it after Aaron had been there? I went back to the video of Aaron approaching the foreman's office, and I didn't see anything relating to a mannequin at any point. I was horrified, just like Aaron was in the video. I really didn't want to watch the last recording on the SD card, but I had to. I was being paid to find out what happened to this kid, and it seemed like the answer may have lied on this SD card. I very reluctantly clicked on the last entry and watched it. The video showed Aaron walking silently back towards the foreman's office. I realized that he had taken shelter in the bathroom of the truck bay. From there, the only way he could have got back to the bay door from which he entered was by passing through the area where he spotted whatever it was. He was completely silent since leaving the bathroom. He turned off his flashlight as he approached a corner and whispered into the camera. "This was where I saw it." He hesitated, but finally turned the light back on and found nothing where the figure had once been standing. He sighed with a mix of relief and fear. He was probably wondering what I was wondering. Where had it gone and how did it move? Something was wrong. He very slowly inched towards the office, knowing he had to pass through that area to reach safety. It was entirely dark in the warehouse except for his flashlight now. Night had fully fallen by this point, and what little natural light had previously illuminated the warehouse via the skylights in the ceiling was completely gone. Aaron crept forward towards the office, and the warehouse around him was entirely silent. Aaron gasped and froze where he stood. I couldn't immediately discern why he did this, but it became clear to me very quickly that a figure was slowly passing by him from directly behind him. The figure was so close to him that it seemed like he and Aaron brushed shoulders. The figure walked into the light coming from Aaron's flashlight, but didn't acknowledge the petrified Aaron's presence. Obviously, this person should have noticed Aaron, considering Aaron was providing the only discernible light source in that part of the building, and was breathing very heavily. But he didn't acknowledge Aaron. It was difficult for me to get a clear view of this figure, as the camera was jumping in and out of focus. But from what I could tell, he was just a normal person. He seemed to be wearing overalls, but I honestly can't be sure. Aaron turned his flashlight off once the figure moved to its right into the foreman's office. Once the light was turned off, I thought the video ended. It was entirely silent for about 40 seconds. I was startled when Aaron began whimpering quietly after his long period of silence. I'm not fully sure what happened in the darkness, but from what I could gather, he had moved forward in hopes of reaching the exit, and wound up at the door of the foreman's office where the figure had just entered. Aaron's sobbing got slightly louder, but then immediately stopped when a rustling emanated from his right. There was a brief silence that seemed to last eternities, before it was finally broken again. "Hi, Aaron." The voice was quiet but shrill, almost like that of a small child. Aaron immediately screamed and dropped the camera. It seemed as if whomever or whatever was in the office had lunged at him, because seconds after Aaron's scream, I heard a piercing screech and the sound of heavy footsteps banging rapidly against the concrete floor of the warehouse. Other than the sound of Aaron's distant pained screams, scattered throughout the next 15 minutes of the video was dark and silent for 29 minutes after Aaron dropped the camera. Then, the video just ended once the SD card ran out of space. Unfortunately, I have no answers for you. I immediately gave the SD card to the police, since this is clearly something much more malicious than just a young man being estranged from his family. I gave the police a statement and gave them the contact information for Miss Holden, and then I asked them not to contact me in regards to this case, unless it was entirely necessary. Thankfully, I haven't heard from them since. I'm obviously shaken to the core by all of this. I rarely sleep anymore. Like I said earlier, I am now retired, but have absolutely no source of income. I can't collect a severance check since I quit my job, but I also find it increasingly difficult to go out into the world to look for a new job. I'm hoping that writing this post will alleviate my mind of the suffering I have experienced since finding what happened to Aaron Snell. If not, I'm honestly not sure I can last much longer. In the days since watching the video, I have had my gun constantly on my person, in case whatever it was that came for Aaron came for me next. My constant fear has persisted, and I've reached the point where I've decided that if tonight proves to be either a sleepless night or another night plagued by nightmares of the thing from the video, I will turn the pistol on myself to spare myself from a fate worse than death that seems to be awaiting us all.